Hello Horror Hounds, welcome to my horror house. It's been a while, a little over 2 months, during which time I've been working on my current horror novella. But did you honestly think that I would let a little thing like Robert Eggers' Nosferatu come and go without jumping back on YouTube and wanting to discuss it with all of you? Because to say that this was a highly anticipated movie of mine would be an absolute understatement. And I would love to be able to discuss the entire movie with you. Sadly, the cinema I went to see it at with a couple of friends had a power cut about 20 minutes before the end of the movie. So I don't know how it ends. And even that is not going to stop me talking about Nosferatu, because up until that point there was just so much to love and engage with and immerse yourself in and absorb. This newest version, Eggers' version, is probably the most sumptuous visually. I don't think you'll find a single person who doesn't sort of praise the look and the feel of the movie and the costumes and the lighting, almost at times completely bled of colour. What I particularly found fascinating as someone who loves sort of the history of cinema and especially of horror cinema and sort of adding those sort of connective pieces of tissue and bits in the jigsaw puzzle, I found it absolutely fascinating how visually he was negotiating a space in between the original 1922 Nosferatu and Werner Herzog's 1979 Nosferatu remake. And then after having a sort of bit of a dialogue with both of those movies, sort of breaking out into its own territory to tell the particular story that Eggers was interested in. One of the focuses of Eggers' version does seem to want to explore the female protagonist, the character that Lily Rose Depp plays. Forgive me, I forget all of the characters' names apart from Orlok, because all of these Dracula adaptations play fast and loose with characters' names anyway. But he seems to want to not only interrogate her relationship with Orlok, but tease out some kind of agency for her beyond just the notion that she is, as in previous versions, sort of pure at heart and a sort of willing sacrifice to keep the vampire up past dawn and therefore destroy him. Instead, with Depp's character, we get someone who has a history of poor mental health that they refer to sort of colloquially as her melancholia, her past melancholy. And what fascinates me about that is it instantly made me think of Lars von Trier's Melancholia, where there is a hint that Kirsten Dunst's character, who suffers from crippling depression, has somehow, like a siren, calls this planet into the orbit of Earth on a sort of destruction path. And in a similar way, the film Nosferatu opens with Depp's character as a teenage girl at most, giving a cri de coeur, calling out from the very depths of her soul for a guardian angel, someone, something, some kind of connection. And the psychic connection is made with not necessarily the angel she was expecting, but the vampire Orlok himself, and a contract is made between the two of them. One of the things I find most interesting about this, and I'm really wondering if like the final 20 minutes is going to add to this, change my perception of it, there's a sort of duality at play. It's really interesting with Depp's character. Her past is presented to me as a necrophile in sort of the purest sense of the word, someone who is in love with death, dead, you know, the notion of death and dead things, not necessarily a physically sexual definition of that word, but something a little purer and truer. She talks at times about her nature. And just before the film cut out, Willem Dafoe, our sort of Van Helsing stand-in character, attributes to her a certain level of sort of natural occult ability. And it's kind of positioning her almost as the natural opposite, the balancing force in nature against Orlok's perverse insistence at living beyond death. And she's the natural balance of that, a force that can attract him with such power that he will then sort of inhabit her orbit to the point of his destruction. Yet at the same time, they're also talking, I believe Eggers is talking about her. There's a dialogue in the film that places her in the position of an abuse victim, someone who's been groomed from an early age, and Orlok is himself an older predator with a power imbalance, or a perceived power imbalance, and there's notions of sexual abuse there, and very interestingly sort of victim shaming that goes on, that people talk to Depp's character and about Depp's character in ways that really set her apart and make her a very lonely character. And there are times in the movie when she defends her own corner, which I found fascinating and very exciting, when she talks about her friend says in words a little sort of like, why can't you just be normal? Why can't you stop this? Why can't you stop fixating on these things? Why can't you just be normal? And Depp's character says, because I'm right. She's the only one who's right, and everyone around her is wrong. And this kind of insistence on the facts, despite everyone else around you telling you you're crazy, is a very interesting place to position one of your main characters at the tail end of 2024 going into 2025. Orlok himself is an absolutely fascinating creation. In the build-up to the release of the movie, and they keep the appearance of Orlok hidden, so I'm not going to go into sort of spoilerific details here. One of the things I was worried about was, given the perfect Orlok in Max Schreck, and Klaus Kinski's taking Werner Herzog and Klaus Kinski taking that Schreck look and giving it weirdly the soul of a lonely poet. We have in Orlok here, I was worried that they were going to over-design him, because the Nosferatu character look is just, it's perfection. It's the great white shark of vampire designs. And they have over-designed Orlok in that sense, but they've gone so far in that direction that, to my mind, he becomes a completely different character. What he is something that I find particularly intriguing, especially as you'll remember talking about the history of cinema and the history of vampires, and going back further than cinema and vampires in literature, and going back further than that and talking about vampires in sort of Romanian folklore. This Orlok is a revenant. He is a dead thing that still moves and breathes and speaks and consumes. What this Orlok is hunger. And boy, does he look like the body of an ancient Romanian nobleman who has just refused to stop moving after death. Really true to the folkloric roots of the vampire, the origins of the vampire, before even Bram Stoker and before that John Polidori with the vampire, and Sheridan Le Fanu in Carmilla turned the vampires into noble men and noble women. This is just a smelly, rank, disgusting hulk of a corpse that never stopped moving and continued to be hungry, hungry, hungry. I saw that there are some people who didn't take to some of the heightened performances, and yet some of it is very sort of theatre school dramatic. But I think honestly that is tapping back into the history of Nosferatu and back to the style of acting that you would get in silent cinema when the original Nosferatu was made. Not everyone is declaiming like that, but there are sort of threads, there's DNA, there's connective tissue, which ties this version back to its history, its originator, and beyond that to the sort of folkloric vampires that were their predecessors. I'm desperate to see it again to know how it ends, but what I saw I loved, and unless they introduce a random sort of song and dance number at the end, I think I will dig where this train was going. I can't wait to see the destination, but there's nothing in what I saw previous to that makes me think that Eggers is not going to absolutely stick the landing and give us an interesting, gnarly Nosferatu for the ages. One that happily sits alongside the gorgeously creepy, genuinely scary 1922 original, now 102 years old. And Werner Herzog's lush, existential Nosferatu, he of the sort of lonely soul, with Isabella Gianni in that movie, again, I think sort of referring back to the acting style of the original. I think all of these three versions of Nosferatu sit in very comfortable orbit with one another, which is kind of amazing considering how many shitty Dracula movies there are, how many shitty Sherlock Holmes movies there are. Crikey, how many shitty versions of lots of very popular things there can be. We now have three versions of Nosferatu that each do their own thing, and each in their own way are eerie, creepy, disturbing, luscious, luxurious, otherworldly. What an absolute triumph.
I bid you welcome.
I welcome you to my house.
Welcome to my house.
Welcome to my home.